Happened was when I first did my first video on this fight, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is a stay busy fight for Errol Spence. For example, he's fought 5 times. This will be his 5th fight in the last 12 months, his 4th fight in 2015. And when you look at who he fought last, Chris Van Heerden, he was ranked very high by the IBF. So I'm thinking, okay, I can see where Errol Spence is going with his career. He's chasing the IBF 147-pound title that Kell Brook now owns. What I've learned over the years of covering boxing is that you can follow a fighter's path when you start to see those little underling belts they're capturing. For example, if somebody becomes the NABF champion, that usually means that they're chasing the WBC title. You know, if somebody becomes the WBO Intercontinental champion, you know, that usually means that they're chasing the WBO title. So now that he's fighting Alejandro Barrera, guess what? Alejandro Barrera is ranked by the IBF. The IBF has now stated that the winner of Errol Spence versus Barrera has to face the winner of Kell Brook versus Kevin Bizier, which is supposed to be announced sometime in the next, few weeks. It's not known yet, but one thing is for sure is the winner of Spence versus Barrera is going to be the IBF mandatory for Kell Brook, and we'll have to fight Kell Brook sometime next year, unless this guy right here says, okay, no, we're going to allow Kell Brook to take another fight, and then we're going to get Errol Spence another fight to get him ready, because for some reason, I don't think that Errol Spence is just going to go in from this Alejandro Barrera fight. And yes, I'm predicting him to defeat Barrera. I don't think he's going to go straight from this fight into a Kell Brook fight. I think he's going to have maybe 1 or 2 more fights in there to get to maybe 21-0 or so, before he actually goes to fight a big Kell Brook fight. But when it comes to the IBF is very stern. They will strip you. So it's a situation where Kell Brook may be allowed to fight Bizier in February. I'm going to say late January or in February. And then maybe fight again in like June or July. Maybe at the end of 2016 is when he's going to have to fight Errol Spence. And Errol Spence at that point in time should be a superstar. That fight's probably going to be on national television because Errol Spence has been fighting on national television. And it's going to be a pretty interesting fight in which I see Kell Brook is possibly going to lose. But that's one good reason to watch Errol Spence versus Alejandro Barrera. It's on PBC on NBC this weekend, the 28th, and it's going to be the undercard of Charlo versus Camford. I'm T Street Controversy. This is T Street Controversy Live. I cover every single major fight live. Errol Spence, I see what's going on with him. Like when that whole, hoopla, he should fight Keith Thurman, all that shit was going on, I'm thinking to myself, here you have Keith Thurman, who's a world champion. And here you have Errol Spence, who's chasing a world championship. But at the same time, he hasn't fought anyone on the level of a Keith Thurman yet. So, you got to understand. I understand where fans feel, all these fights should be made when fighters call each other out. When it comes to when you're managing a fighter, right, and you're promoting a fighter, I wouldn't say fight Keith Thurman right now. I can see if it was an Americana or something. But this Errol Spence, I mean, for crying out loud, he's still fighting 5 times a year. He's still, getting wins in his belt. So therefore, he's a prospect fringe contender still. So for you to say, fight Keith Thurman and all kind of stuff like this, I'm thinking, well, for one, even if I'm sure Errol Spence would love to fight a Keith Thurman. But do you think at this time in Errol Spence's young career, do you think that he's calling the shots? I'm thinking it's the people upstairs that are saying, nah, don't fight Keith Thurman right now. Don't even worry about that. We're not going to make that fight, and then they all managed and advised by the same guy. I just don't see it being up to the fighters. And I didn't think it was fair of Floyd Mayweather to just throw Keith Thurman and Errol Spence like that. And Floyd Mayweather knows how the boxing game works. And he knows that it wouldn't be a good fight for Errol Spence at this point in career. And it would be kind of a step back, how can I put it? Career-wise for Keith Thurman to fight at Errol Spence when you look at the business end of things. So I would love to see the fight. Don't get that shit twisted. I would love to see the fight, and I believe it's a fight that can happen maybe in 2018 or so, because right now, if you don't know, once again, Errol Spence is chasing the IBF title at 147 pounds. He's wiping out the guys that are ranked in the IBF, and now he's in a situation where the IBF have said, okay, now you're going to fight Kell Brook. So I'm T Street Controversy. This is T Street Controversy Live. Of course, I'm going to be covering Errol Spence versus Alejandro Barrera. PBC on NBC. It's a midday card. It comes on like 3 p.m. Eastern time. And I believe that Errol Spence, I think it's only 2 fights. The Errol Spence versus Barrera and the Charlo versus Camford. So I believe the Errol Spence is going to be the one to open the card. I'm T Street Controversy on Twitter. T Street Controversy on Instagram. T Street Controversy on Facebook. This is T Street Controversy Live. Please subscribe.